In this video, I'll be going over one kind of buck making, foam buck using builder's insulation that I've glued together into a solid block and then whittled out. A track nose. It's certainly not the only kind of buck that you can build, but it is really flexible, gives you a lot of options, it's pretty fast to do. The reason I like this project is it's an example to describe how you can achieve symmetry on a piece like this. To make your own buck for a track nose, you could follow these steps, and I think this will be pretty easy. Start with a silhouette of how the track nose looks where it meets the hood. That's what this white cutout represents. I've drawn a center line on there, and I've drawn a few or three cross stations that are perpendicular to the center line. The purpose of those will become obvious as we go along. This is to help get you symmetry as you start to shape your buck. So I made this cutout, and then I'm going to trace that onto 2-inch builder's insulation. Certainly any other version would work too. It's just the 2-inch insulation is fat, and so there's fewer pieces to cut out, but absolutely anything would work. So it's handy to have one cutout that you can use for all of those pieces. I've traced that onto a larger piece of cardboard. I've recorded all of the lines on there as well. The reason that I'm gluing all of these pieces of foam to a larger piece is so that I'll have a flat, stable surface. I could use plywood as well, but cardboard's cheaper, and I have this piece here. So we'll go with this and see how this works. So I'm going to glue my foam to this piece of cardboard, and we'll build it up until I have enough material to work with that it's large enough to represent the completed buck. By far the best glue that I've found for use on styrofoam for these purposes is this stuff called Weld Bond. I know this sounds like an advertisement for this, but I tell you what, this is by far the best. I've tried spray foam, liquid nails, various kinds of adhesive, or spray adhesive rather. It's just, most adhesives either don't stick that well, or they attack the foam, or they don't sand, like liquid nails. When you're trying to sand through the foam, the liquid nails balls up and really makes it so you can't shape the foam, whereas this stuff, it doesn't interfere with your shaping. And definitely you want to get it in a 3-liter jug as opposed to the little small bottles that you get at the grocery store. It smells like Elmer's glue, but I promise it is not the same. I don't know what's in it, but it definitely works better. I tried Elmer's of all their different heavy-duty white glue and so forth, and it's not the same for gluing styrofoam. I don't know what it is about this, but take my word for it. You will not regret it if you use this material, whereas if you try something else, it may not work out and it'll be a mess and disappointing after you've already cut all your foam and so forth. So another nice thing about this stuff is it will stick really well to just about anything. So you can even glue foam to plywood or even metal on a car. I've used it to build up an area on a car to use as a buck in shaping. It's pretty amazing, really. So I don't need to be insanely meticulous about glopping this stuff on there. Just get some on. I'm just using a super cheap brush from the hardware store. This glue is water soluble, so it's real easy to clean up. Then I'm going to take my slices of foam one at a time, and glue them on top of each other like that. Don't feel like every piece of foam has to make the entire silhouette. Inevitably, you'll have pieces that, you know, you can't quite cut a full silhouette out of. And so, for example, here's one that has a corner missing. Not a big deal. This glue works so well that by the time it's all said and done, you'll be able to glue a little chunk in there like that, and it'll work fine, and as if you never had a separate piece at all. I've left my first station, the bottom station, is cut exactly to size. The ones that proceed forward from there, I've left the bottom a little bit big so that I can put some additional crown in the bottom of the piece. Otherwise, I left them all the same around the rest of the perimeter. They're all, each station that I glue on here will be the same. I'm reasoning that on a track nose, the nature of the track nose is that it tapers as it goes forward, and therefore will be getting smaller as I move towards the front. And so a good place to start is just the same size as that base piece, and then it'll get smaller as we go forward. Glop a little bit more on there. You don't have to cover every last square inch of the foam. It's just, I want to make sure that I get it nicely adhered. The same glue works really well if you make a mistake. Let's say you accidentally cut too much out or overshape or something. Just cut a big hunk out, sand it flat, glue another piece in there, and no one will know. By the time you get it all shaped, you won't even be able to tell that any changes were made. I'm going to put a little bit more on the edges. Probably don't really need to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm just going to put a little bit in my edges there. Stick that missing chunk in. I'm going to build up a sandwich of these. I'm going to leave a couple of shot bags on it overnight. It really normally only takes probably a couple of hours to dry if you have maybe two pieces being glued together, but since it's late in the day anyway, I figure I'll just leave it overnight, and then for sure it will be dry if you leave it overnight. The finished rough buck is about 20 inches deep. I believe in the last segment I said wait at least a couple of hours for the glue. I think probably overnight is better. I think thinking of the shellac that I use sometimes when I add clay over foam. It really took overnight to dry, and I did it in 2 different phases. I did not hesitate to combine chunks to make up a complete section of this as necessary. I left a nice obvious chunk down here in the bottom to show you how easy that is to do and how it nicely trims away. I'm going to mark off the center line and then shape one side until I'm happy with that, and then I'll make templates from the one side to use on the other side to get symmetry. This is solid foam. I could have used less foam had I made a cardboard box, or if I'd made a plywood box and then only used foam on the outer portion. The benefit of that is using less foam. The drawback is if for some reason you end up cutting deeper than you expected in your artistic sculpting, then you run into the structure underneath and that becomes a hassle. So in the interest of complete artistic freedom, I just made it solid foam. It wasn't that big a deal. It probably took hour and a half to cut out all of those sections on a bandsaw. On the base of this buck, when I traced out my original outline, I extended all of the lines for the different stations as well as the center line. I extended those out past the edge so that for future use, when I come back and check stations against the foam, I'll know where they need to lie in relation to the buck. To mark the center line on here, I'm taking this square, I'm putting it against the buck. I put a magnetic protractor on there to make sure it was at 90 degrees, and then I marked that line. That's my center line. I did the same on the other side. I connected the two across the face of the buck so that I know where my center line is.